Alô, boa tarde a todos. Acho que já podemos começar, né, Alex?
I think we can begin.
Sim, Rondineli.
Ok, obrigado. Boa tarde a todos.
Good afternoon to all.
Gostaria de agradecer aos
I would like to thank
palestrantes e ao nosso
our
palestrante
speakers
por ter aceitado o nosso convite, a todos os
for
presentes
accepting our invitation and for all those who are present. The seminar, Preserving Scientific Journals and Guaranteeing Accessibility, is part of the 25-year anniversary of SciELO, and it will end with the International Conference in September 2023 in São Paulo. We've had some seminars already, but we have others to celebrate the 25 years of SciELO Brazil. And for more information, access the site that you see here. All seminars are recorded and are available on YouTube, on the SciELO channel, and the slides are also available on the site that you see here. As an essential part of the events by SciELO Brazil, all participants should follow our code of conduct by the principle that diversity, equity, accessibility, and equity. This is for a safe and healthy scenario. You can see the code of conduct as you see here. I will make a small introduction. When we talk about scientific journals, preservation has always been a matter of concern. Maintaining these has always been the responsibility of librarians. They were the curators, the numbers, and they assured that all the printed journals were cataloged, organized, and distributed in several channels to guarantee preservation without risks of accidents of natural and non-natural incidents. When we talk about digital preservation, it's more complex. We have to think about the responsibility of maintaining, have to think about obsolescence and storage in the long run. Only to put into context, it's the set of activities aimed at keeping access in time, disaster plan, institutional policies, and preservation and maintenance of the material. The objective is to mitigate the inherent threats, hardware failures, software failure, natural disasters, human failures, and financial sustainability. So who is responsible? Editors, libraries, and institutions, all responsible. Although if there's not defined, the preservation will be threatened. So it's very important that when you define responsibility, you have to have an institutional policy. But we know that that's not what happens in practice. Just for us to have an idea, in the JASPER article of 2017, with 124 members of the Association of Research Libraries, only 32 libraries had a policy, and 23 were working on doing. So let's imagine open access, where many do not have financial incentives and they depend on alternative sources of funding, just like rates or as APC. The consequence is to try to find solutions at a low budget. And sometimes there's no preservation policy. And just for you to have an idea, there were 14,068 periodicals or journals of open access indexed in DOA, and only 5,881 were enrolled in a preservation. So, and 10, only 4 had some preservation, in other words. Considering all the factors, the authors, Laxo, Matias, and Yan, did a study where they looked at all the disappearance of these from 2000 to 2020, and they consulted Scopus, to DOAJ, Urooj, and they tracked using the Wayback Machine of Internet Archives to see if they had been archived or not. Of the total of the survey, they found 174 journals of open access that disappeared, vanished from 2000 to 2019 throughout all disciplines and in all regions in the world. Of these 174, what they took into account, 154 journals had no access. They weren't even either printed or nor digital. 7 journals had more than 50% of their content vanished. So they considered if there were journals with less than 50% of the content online, they considered that a vanished journal. 7 had a printed copy, but no digital copy, and 6 had their content partially taken over by a paid service. And thinking of all of them that were not preservation, at least 900 were inactive and had the risk of disappearing. Therefore, the authors suggest that there be initiatives to support these small journals and that have no funding. The study of these authors was the inspiration for DOAJ, Clocks Archive, Internet Archive, Keepers Registry, International Center, and Public Knowledge Project. And they announced the collaboration to increase preservation and with the consequent JASPER project that will be presented by Alicia Wise. So journals are preserved forever. It's a preservation initiative of journals, of open access journals. And then Nizami, who's a librarian in the Public Knowledge Project, will talk about the PKP Preservation Network, initiative of preservation of open access journals. And in Brazil, Miguel Arellano, which is the coordinator of the Brazilian network of digital services of digital preservation. And he will talk about this network. And then I will talk about SciELO Brazil, preservation. Have a nice seminar, and I pass it to you, Alicia.
Hello, everyone.
Olá a todos.
Can you hear me, everyone? Hello there. It's good to be with you. Great. Let me share my screen and a few slides. And first off, I'm dialing in from London, and it's really a privilege to be part of SciELO's 25th birthday celebration. So happy birthday, SciELO. And thank you, Rondineli, for both the invitation and for the very nice scene setting you've just given everyone. So let me just briefly say something about Clocks, my organization, and introduce the 2 key words that I'm hoping to leave you with today, and those are partnership and preservation. So Clocks is a charity. We work with publishers and publishing platforms and libraries in 60 countries around the world. We're jointly governed by libraries and publishers, and our mission is to preserve the scholarly record, to make sure that scholarship created now remains accessible to anyone who needs it or wants to access it 500 or more years into the future. And we work in very close partnership with other preservation services around the world, including our sister services, Cariniana and PKP-PN. So I'm delighted that Miguel and Urooj are also speaking today. It's really important that content is preserved in more than one archive, and I hope to give you some examples today about why that's the case, and also steps that archives are taking in partnership to make it easier to ensure content remains accessible. So let's talk first about why digital preservation is important. You can probably all think of examples around the world where due to disagreements around politics or religion or other matters, there can be tension, or there can be decisions taken by governments that this or that information should no longer remain in public view. It's really important, therefore, that content, wherever it is published and made available, is also curated for the long term and available to make accessible again in times of strife and of tension. The same has been true for a very long time for printed books and journals, and libraries have done a tremendous job, as Rondineli said, of looking after and preserving print, just as they do now digital publications. But there's a difference in the kind of curation that's necessary. Printed books and journals sit in plain view on shelves, or in your office, or in your home, or in a library. So you can see if the paper is beginning to fray, or to turn yellow, or to disintegrate, and you can take active steps to professionally curate it. But digital information is more tricky. It is invisible, it's intangible. It's on servers or on machines where we can't look at it and see that it's at risk or deteriorating in front of us. So many of the risks to digital information are also invisible. Long-term preservation requires active curation. You need to look after the content and the data to ensure it's healthy when it enters an archive and that it remains so. You also have to actively manage to change that digital preservation into future formats and to migrate it so that it can continue to be usable and accessible as technology changes. And to ensure that there's sufficient resilience and redundancy in the preservation world, it's so critical that content is held in more than one archive. Diversity in organizations, our governance, our management, our funding is absolutely critical, because 500 years from now, none of us can be totally confident about which archiving solution is going to be the one that is most successful. So routine risks to content can cause degradation and can cause a loss of access, but catastrophic failures are more common. And I would say that in our experience working with libraries and publishers around the world, the numbers of stories we hear about a software migration, a platform migration, and the catastrophic loss of content is a recurrent theme. That is a major risk. It's often, little oversights or errors that people make in those kinds of processes that make digital information at risk. And therefore, the failure to preserve and to place that content into the care of a long-term archive is the key challenge in the long-term preservation of scholarship at the moment. The more publishers and publishing platforms we have, ensuring their content is properly archived, the more safe and secure we can all be that our shared cultural and intellectual heritage will remain accessible for the long term. So a key message: working with one digital preservation service isn't enough to weather future uncertainties. And we recommend a minimum of 3 archival partners for any library publisher, open access publisher, university press, commercial publisher. It doesn't matter what kind of publisher you are. The resilience and redundancy you get with 3 different services is really essential for the preservation of the content. You can archive in more places than that, of course, and that makes the content even more secure. But over time, there's a balance to be struck with the additional costs and the additional environmental impact of that additional preservation. So those are important sustainability questions for us to consider. Now, Rondineli has already talked about research by Michael Laakso, a terrific colleague in Finland, who started by looking at not just all scholarship, all of it is at risk and needs to be curated, but he was looking closely at open access content in particular. He started with journals, and Rondineli has already given you the disturbing statistics about the number of open access journals that have already disappeared from the web. So the preservation of open access journals is critically important, and that's going to be my focus today. But before we start on the journal slide, I just wanted to highlight some more recent research also done by Michael Laakso, specifically looking at open access books, monographs in particular. He used open discovery sources, data sources, to first identify where open access books exist on the web and the very many hosting domains where they reside. He was finding scholarly works on Dropbox and on individual scholars' websites, not always aggregated together and managed professionally as you do at SciELO. So books are partly at risk because there's a very wide range of hosting platforms and environments. And they're also very at risk because there's no clear flow of books into archives, and then archives publicly declaring what their holdings are so that we can all feel assured and relaxed about what is preserved for the long term. So the journal challenges we'll be talking about today are major, and it's good that we're working in partnership to overcome those challenges. But I fear that the threats to open access books may be even more daunting. And so a similar effort is needed on this front. But let's talk about Project JASPER. So this was triggered by Michael Laakso's original research, and it is spearheaded, it is led by the Directory of Open Access Journals, DOAJ. And the concept for this project was at a very high level, very simple when it launched just over 2 years ago. The idea was that changes could be made in the DOAJ dashboard that publishers use so that they could signal they would like their open access journal archived. And then the content and the metadata for that journal would flow into a technical pipeline provided or to be developed and provided by Internet Archive. And from there, it could be ingested and taken in by multiple archives. And in addition to Internet Archive, PLOX and PKP-PN, we were the 3 archives that the project started with. The aspiration has always been to add additional archiving partners as we go forward. The ISSN agency, which measures all or keeps track of all of the unique identifiers given to journals, is also a really important partner, and I'll explain why in just a little bit. So you can find out lots about the project at this URL across the bottom, but let me give you at a high level an overview of how it works. So we have focused on a subset of the open access journals in DOAJ. We are really looking at diamond open access journals that are scholar-led for the most part, so very tiny, but dedicated editors and journal teams acting independently often and based in universities around the world. What these journals have in common is that none of them charges an article processing charge or APC. They are all indexed in DOAJ, and the titles that we're looking at have no preservation policy at the start of their engagement with Project JASPER. DOAJ has then developed and evolved the dashboard at DOAJ to give publishers an easy way to click a button and to say that they would like their journal preserved. From there, they make a choice of one of 3 options for preservation. So if the title is hosted on PKP's Open Journal Systems, OJS, then they are able to select PKP-PN as a preservation partner. If the title has detailed metadata, no matter what platform it's hosted on, they're able to archive with clocks. And if the title is in DOAJ, but it doesn't have very rich metadata or none at all, and perhaps not even an ISSN or other identifier, then it's able to be preserved in Internet Archive. So the publisher makes its choice, and the project partners have all self-funded this initiative to create the technical interfaces and the pipeline that allows the content and the metadata to flow into the various archives. We also self-fund the project management. And what we have found over the course of the project is that it's the actual human engagement with the various publishers around the world that is sometimes most time consuming. And we've needed to put in place extra resources and processes to help us manage that more effectively. And it's a delight to do so. We've made terrific contacts with new publishers in many different countries. Now, I mentioned earlier that the Keepers Registry at the ISSN agency is an important partner in this project. And that's because, unlike for books, it is possible actually for anyone on this webinar, anywhere in the world, to find out what journals are being preserved and where. And that's done via this service, the Keepers Registry, which is freely available. And you can type in the URL or the ISSN for any journal you're interested in and get information back about where it's being preserved. So an important part of the JASPER project is that all of the archiving partners continue to add metadata about what they've ingested and are reporting to the Keepers Registry so everyone else can find out about the preservation status of the journals participating. Just about finished. I've got 2 more slides, I think. I just wanted to give you an example of some of the journals that have been archived through the project. I think we're working now with small journal publishers, scholar-led publishers in 12 countries. And they are titles like this, from Croatia or Finland or Ireland, Poland, Sri Lanka. For example, this business journal from Sri Lanka, or Fafnir, which is a Finnish journal of science fiction and fantasy research. They're all really interesting titles. There's a lot of fine scholarship in them. Some of them are very rich in multimedia, and they're all important parts of the scholarly record. Very important, sometimes at international level, but certainly at a regional level, and in a variety of languages, which is so important for bibliodiversity. So that is the JASPER project in a nutshell. I wanted to just end with one final example. There's a new blog post that is hosted on our website, but that was written by library colleagues at the University of Florida. And they just published this a couple of weeks ago. And they were talking about preservation from a modern library perspective. They have long included clauses in their agreements with commercial publishers to require the long-term preservation of books and journals. And they continue to do that. There's some great language in this blog that can be reused. But they've said they've sat up recently and realized that they themselves are now publishers. The University of Florida Press has a wide array of open access journals it publishes. They're hosted on OJS. And they realized that if they expect commercial publishers to archive in 3 places, well, they themselves should be doing the same with the content that they publish. And so they've taken steps. They themselves are archiving and preserving locally on campus, and they are working with CLOCKS and PKP to ensure that that content is also preserved in external sites and services for that resilience and redundancy. So I'll end there, but just a couple of examples about how important preservation is, but how essential partnership is around the world to look after our shared cultural and intellectual heritage. So thank you very much, and over to Urooj.
Thank you so much. I'm just going to take a moment to share my screen. Okay. I'd also like to thank SciELO for this invitation. Both our organizations are celebrating our 25th anniversary, and I think that's quite special. So hello, everyone. I'm here representing the Public Knowledge Project today through a presentation on the topic of our preservation network. This presentation was originally developed by Kevin Stranick, who couldn't be here today, and asked if I could step in on his behalf. I'm going to do my best, but there are likely questions that you have that I won't be able to answer, but I'm really happy to take them back and find the answer for you. I'd also like to acknowledge that this presentation borrows from Kate Shuttleworth's work titled Intro to PKP's Preservation Network. Kate is the digital scholarship librarian at PKP and Simon Fraser University. Before getting into our preservation network, I think it's important to spend a few moments on the project itself, and the project being the Public Knowledge Project. PKP is best known for the development of Open Journal Systems, or OJS, the world's most widely used journal management and publishing system. OJS provides journals with a website and a system for managing submissions, peer review, copy editing, layout editing, and of course, to publish. PKP is committed to the principles of free and open source software development, which enables users to download, install, and customize PKP software, all free of cost. In addition to this, we have a deep commitment to increasing publishing access, quality, and diversity. This year, PKP celebrates its 25th year, and earlier this year, we became a core facility of Simon Fraser University in British Columbia, Canada. Okay. I noted that it's our 25th year because in these 25 years, we've had an impressive impact. PKP created OJS to help scholars run their own journals. PKP wanted OJS to be used by scholars from around the world, focusing on their local research interests in their own languages. And so the map on the screen represents OJS's use worldwide. As of 2022, OJS is used by more than 34,000 journals, publishing more than 5 articles per year in 156 countries and in 60 languages. OJS has been translated into 60 languages, including Portuguese. In fact, Brazil is the second largest user of OJS behind Indonesia. OJS journals have published over 5.8 million articles. At PKP, we're really proud of our worldwide usage because the commitment to making research a global public good includes bibliodiversity and research generated in all parts of the world, including the Global South, and on subject matters that pertain to the Global South. What's more is a recent study in 2021 showed that of Diamond OA journals, 60% that were surveyed used OJS to publish. So Diamond meaning those that do not charge a fee to the author to publish, nor to the reader to access content. So OJS has played a significant role in promoting open, diverse, and accessible scholarly content. However, with the proliferation of journal publishing, a new challenge has arisen, and that is one of long-term preservation of this valuable content. So with approximately 5.8 million articles distributed across 34,000 journals hosted on web servers with varying levels of security and durability worldwide, it becomes an imperative for us to consider effective long-term preservation strategies because there's a real risk to this content being lost, as both of the previous presenters have pointed to. The long-term digital preservation for scholarly publications has been noted as a best practice from leaders in the field of scholarly publishing, like, for example, the Directory of Open Access Journals, who, as part of their seal, do require that journals have a preservation policy. So in pursuit of a solution to the preservation challenge, PKP took a significant step by developing a locks plugin specifically designed for OJS journals. The plugin enables journals to establish a seamless connection with locks preservation network, offering enhanced preservation capabilities. So for those unfamiliar with LOCKSS, we sort of went through this, but it stands for Lots of Copies Keep Stuff Safe, and it's an open source software initiative based at Stanford University dedicated to digital preservation. And the core idea behind LOCKSS is the creation of a network consisting of distributed nodes. And so each of these nodes maintains copies of all files contributed by the network of participants. So the strength of this network, which Alicia spoke to, is that it's resilient. In the event that a journal disappears from the web, for example, a copy of the content remains within the LOCKSS network. And by utilizing this distributed nature of the network, lost content can be restored from any of the available nodes. Furthermore, the strength of the LOCKSS network lies again in its redundancy. So in the face of technological failures, security breaches, natural disasters, or if a node fails, the other nodes still hold copies of everyone's files. This ensures that even if one node encounters difficulties, the content remains intact and accessible through other nodes. So once the technical solution of combining OJS and LOCKSS was in place, a remaining challenge came to light. Most OJS journals lacked access to a network that would allow them to participate in preservation efforts. Networks, as it turns out, were complex to establish, requiring multiple institutions to come together and share their content. Additionally, existing networks often catered exclusively to predetermined participants, leaving unaffiliated journals unable to join. So to address this issue, PKP took an initiative to create what we now have as the PKP Preservation Network, also known as PKP-PN. This network was designed to be inclusive and open to any OJS journals wishing to join. By offering a globally distributed set of nodes, PKP made preservation accessible and straightforward for journals. Setting up a connection with the PKP-PN is remarkably simple, and I will get into that in just a moment. PKP partner organizations generously contribute by being nodes in our network, ensuring stability and reach. These partners include the University of Alberta, the University of British Columbia, Indiana University, the University of Pittsburgh, the University of Victoria, Simon Fraser University, and the Ontario Council of University Libraries through the Scholars Portal, and also the National Documentation Center in Greece. Currently, over 8,500 journals actively participate in the PKP-PN, illustrating the broad impact and adoption of this preservation initiative. But it's also crucial to emphasize that preservation is best practice for journal publishing. By implementing a preservation strategy, journals ensure long-term accessibility and survival of published content. Without such measures in place, there's a significant risk of especially small distributed journal content vanishing forever. PKP-PN serves as a dark archive, meaning that end users will not have immediate access to preserved content. Instead, access is only triggered by specific events. Once a triggered event occurs, PKP imports the preserved content into one or more OJS instances hosted by a PKP member institution. Once loaded into these hosting services, the content becomes publicly accessible. So it's essential to note that archiving your content in the PKP-PN is not the same as backing up your OJS site. Backing up your OJS site is still very much encouraged. And what this will allow you to do is immediately restore anything that is lost. Whereas with the PKP-PN, we're only able to recover things once a trigger event takes place. So now let's explore the requirements for registering your journal with the PKP. To ensure a smooth registration process, there are a few key elements you'll have to have in place. First, your journal should be hosted on a recent version of OJS. So specifically, we mean 3.1 or higher. This ensures compatibility and optimal functioning with the PKP-PN. Next, it's also essential to have an ISSN number, so the International Standard Serial Number, registered for your journal. The ISSN should be accurately entered into the journal settings within your OJS instance. The ISSN serves as a unique identifier for your journal and aids in the preservation and discovery of the content. Finally, to be eligible for registration, your journal must have at least one published article, and this ensures that there is content available for preservation within PKPPN. Once the plugin is enabled, deposits into the preservation network happen automatically every time a journal issue is published. Journal managers can monitor the plugin status to ensure successful additions to the network. Journals have the ability to register for the PKP preservation network by simply installing and enabling the PKPPN plugin. So by visiting the website settings and locating the PKPPN plugin in the list of installed plugins, journals can confirm that it is enabled. And if it isn't enabled, you can do so through the settings of the plugins within your OJS instance. Clicking on the drop-down menu reveals the plugin settings. Accessing the plugin settings reveals a checklist with terms of use. You'll be prompted to read and agree to terms of use. The journal identifier automatically provided by OJS will be displayed, and then just simply click Save, and that completes the process. At this point, if you're ever worried around whether your content is in fact being preserved, you can select Status under the settings, and you will be able to ensure that your content is being archived successfully. PKP is actively collaborating with LOCKSS to upgrade to version 2 of the system, and this upgrade will enhance the preservation capabilities of the PKPPN, ensuring even better long-term protection for your journal content. We're committed to continuously improving and evolving the network to meet the needs of the scholarly community. Furthermore, PKP welcomes more journals to join the PKPPN. By becoming part of this global preservation network, you can contribute to the preservation of scholarly knowledge and ensure the accessibility of your journal's content. We encourage journals to take advantage of this opportunity and register for the PKPPN to enjoy the benefits of long-term content preservation. So to find out more about the PKPPN and its implementation, we invite you to review the comprehensive PKPPN plugin guide available on our documentation hub. This guide offers in-depth information and instructions on how to make the most of the preservation network. And again, if you have specific questions or require assistance, we encourage you to please turn to PKP's community forum. You can post questions, share experiences, and benefit from the collective knowledge and community support that we have. Alternatively, you can message us directly by visiting us on our homepage and filling out our contact form. Our team is always happy to address inquiries and concerns that you may have regarding the PKPPN. Thanks so much for your attention, and I'm going to turn it over now to our next speaker.
Okay. Boa tarde.
Good
Está tudo
afternoon.
bem?
Can
Obrigado.
you hear me well?
Sim, me
Thank
escuta?
You can hear me?
Yes, sim. Você me escuta?
Can you hear me?
Sim. Ok, vou começar a falar, ok? Em
So I'll begin
português.
speaking in Portuguese.
Aham. Eu vou ter que fechar meu som porque estou ouvindo o inglês. Tudo bem. Ok, bom, então, boa tarde a todos. Estamos
afternoon to
aqui
all.
celebrando os
We are
25
here
anos da
celebrating
Rede
25
SciELO,
years
da
of the
biblioteca
SciELO network,
virtual, né, eletrônica
of
de
the
periódicos,
virtual
e é um
library,
prazer muito grande para mim.
of
Sou do
journals,
IBICT,
and it's a
Instituto
great
Brasileiro
pleasure.
de Informação em Ciência e Tecnologia, e hoje também somos
I am
parceiros, né, a SciELO e
also
a
a partner,
Cariniana, do que seria a
SciELO
Rede de
and
Preservação
Cariniana,
Digital.
which
Então,
is
para
the
começar, eu
Digital
vou passar minha
Preservation
apresentação para
Network.
vocês.
So I will
Acredito que estão
make my
assistindo todo mundo,
presentation. I
sim?
think you can see that, right?
Dá para ver aí? Sim, né?
Can you see it? Yes.
Ok, bom. Então, a parte que me toca a mim
I'm
seria
going to talk
exatamente
about
a de preservação de periódicos científicos
preservation of
no Brasil.
scientific journals
Sim,
in Brazil.
como vocês sabem, né, a
As
Rede
you know,
Brasileira de Preservação
the
Digital
Brazilian
Cariniana, ela
Network
está sediada
of
no
Digital
Instituto Brasileiro de Informação e Ciência e
Preservation,
Tecnologia,
Cariniana.
e
It is in the
temos
Brazilian Institute
10
of Science
anos
and
de
Technology.
funcionamento, e
10
em
years,
realidade é uma rede que começou
and it's a
seguindo, de certa
network
forma, também na
that
evolução dos
followed
periódicos
also
científicos na
the
rede. Alguns de vocês já
evolution
devem
of
saber,
the
né, que
journals
é
and
a
the
única
network.
rede de
You probably
preservação
know that
digital de
it's the
publicações
only
seriadas
digital
na América
preservation
Latina.
network
Também
of
ela é a primeira rede de
publication
preservação
series in
digital de
Latin America,
periódicos
and it's the
nacionais.
first
E
digital
também é uma
preservation
agência
network
de
of
arquivamento
national
no, de
journals,
Keepers
and it's also
Registry,
an
com
agency
proporcionalmente mais revistas
of
que apenas estão em
filing
uma única
in the
agência.
Keepers
Ou
Registry
seja,
with
muitas
more
revistas
journals
brasileiras só estão
in a
preservadas na
single
Cariniana.
agency. Many of the
Ela
Brazilian
também,
journals are
como
only
falei, ela foi
here.
estabelecida em 2012
It
pelo
was
IBIC,
established in
com o apoio da
2012
Aliança
by
LOX, da Stanford
IBICT
University.
with the support of the LOX
O
Alliance
que
of
posso lhe falar
Stanford
sobre a
University.
missão da
And I want to
Rede
talk about the
Cariniana
mission
é de que ela se
of the
concentra na
Cariniana
preservação do
network. It
patrimônio
concentrates
científico e
on
cultural do
the
Brasil,
scientific
patrimônio
and cultural
digital, ou
digital
seja,
assets
aquelas manifestações que
preservation
temos
in
de
Brazil.
toda a produção científica e cultural
We
que
have
está na
all the
rede
culture
e
and
que as
scientific
instituições privadas e públicas no Brasil produzem.
publications
Ela está, em
produced in
certa forma,
Brazil.
também com um
It is
propósito de
also
disponibilizar grupo
makes
de pesquisa
available a
internacional
group
para todos os
of
pesquisadores
international
da
researchers
área,
to all
desenvolver,
area
disseminando
researchers,
conhecimento em relação às
developing and
práticas,
spreading
às
knowledge and
políticas e às
administrative
teorias
practices,
no campo da
policies and
gestão da
theories
preservação
in
digital a longo
digital
prazo.
preservation
Essa é uma das
management in the
missões
long
da
term.
nossa rede também.
This
E
is
também nós
also
temos
part of our
a
mission.
Cariniana trabalha para
And
que
Cariniana
as
also
instituições
works
parceiras
for
possam
the
adotar
partner institutions
normas e
can
padrões
adopt
recomendados
norms and
pelas
standards
principais
that are
iniciativas de
recommended
preservação
by the
digital no
main
mundo.
initiatives of
Essa é a
digital
nossa
preservations
missão
worldwide.
e ela
This is
é
our
uma
mission.
missão institucional que foi criada
It's an
porque
institutional
nós
mission
temos
developed
regimento institucional no
because we
qual
have
a
bylaws
diretoria, nossa instituição,
and
ela
the
criou
net
todo um mandato no qual se
were
diz como
created
uma
with a
rede de
mandate
preservação digital deveria
to
funcionar dentro da esfera federal.
say how
Temos
this
também uma
network should
política de
work at the
preservação
federal level.
digital da
And we
rede,
also
na qual
have
nós também nos
a
comprometemos
policy
a
of
guardar de
digital
forma
preservation
segura
services
e de longo
where
prazo, né, essas
are
informações
committed
produzidas pelas
to have the
instituições
information
brasileiras.
safe in the long term,
Nosso
all
trabalho
information
não é
in
como não
Brazilian
é apenas de uma única
organization.
instituição, é um trabalho
It's not one
que funciona em
organization,
parceria,
but it's a
ou
work
seja,
that
nós não somos
with
os únicos, temos o
partners, we're
apoio
not
de
the
mais
only
de
one.
27
We have support
instituições a
more
nível
than
nacional e também
17
internacional, como o
institutions
ICCN,
locally
a
and
Sociedade
internationally.
Lusófona de Goa, o ISTEC
These
e
are
outras
some of those
instituições
that
de
we
fora do
have,
Brasil, como a Predig também, que também se
like
dedica à
Rede
preservação
outside
digital
Brazil,
na América Latina.
which
Esse é o nosso
for Latin
funcionamento,
America.
ou seja,
This is
fazer
how
serviços de
we
preservação
work.
digital
We
no
do
nível
the
nacional
services
precisa
of
de
digital
vários tipos de
preservation,
instituições que
and
estejam
to do that,
comprometidas com
we have to have
projetos, com
many
ideias, com
partners that are
políticas e
committed
planos
with
para a
policies,
melhor
with plans
guarda das informações digitais.
to
Nós temos
save all the
metas
digital
também, nesses
information.
10
We also
anos a gente
have goals,
estabeleceu as metas de
established goals
nosso projeto, né, ou da nossa
of our
rede, que
project and our
basicamente
network,
seria
and
promover as
basically
informações
was to promote
e
information,
prover informações às suas instituições
provide
parceiras
information
e a
to our
toda a
partner
comunidade de
institutions and to
profissionais
the
das
whole
bibliotecas, arquivos e
community of
museus,
library
para que possam
professionals,
garantir a
archives and
longevidade das suas
museums,
coleções
so that we
digitais.
can guarantee
Nós
longevity
tentamos
of
fazer
digital
isso
collection.
através
We
de
try
cursos, através de palestras, através de várias formas de repasse de materiais informativos sobre a preservação digital. Nós também repassamos resultados de pesquisa para estimular o planejamento e a gestão de riscos dos sistemas de informação. Ou seja, através de nossas reuniões, nós discutimos qual seria a melhor forma de planejar um projeto de gestão de risco sobre a situação dos acervos digitais. Outra meta também é que nós devemos trabalhar de forma colaborativa em projetos individuais e institucionais, incluindo com patrocínio de eventos, programas e de formação também. Nossas metas se concretizam em várias formas. Algumas delas são de domínio público, todo mundo pode ver, como nossa revista de preservação digital brasileira. Ela surgiu em 2020 e agora já estamos no 4º ano, né? E nela estamos publicando muitos resultados de pesquisa da nossa rede. Acreditamos que essa é uma das formas que podemos deixar registrados, sim, toda a nossa produção como rede. Também temos outros produtos e outras formas de fazer esse tipo de repasse das práticas de preservação digital, através de glossários, através de um diretório de revistas preservadas no Brasil, no qual nós colocamos lá todos os dados que temos sobre as revistas que estão no Brasil e que estão preservadas na rede cariniana. Produzimos livros, produzimos também outros materiais para ajudar as instituições a guardar de forma mais adequada suas publicações e suas produções. Metas também temos, que envolvem tanto o JS e também outros projetos também muito importantes, como são os repositórios de dados de pesquisa. Estamos trabalhando na integração do OJS com o Dataverse, que seria uma das iniciativas que vão além das publicações eletrônicas, porque também se está se pensando na guarda dos dados dos artigos, dos conteúdos das pesquisas publicadas em periódicos OJS. Essa também é uma meta que nós estamos promovendo aqui na Rede Cariniana. Os serviços, entre eles, estaria exatamente esse. Temos um repositório de dados, né, Cariniana, no qual nós temos todo um fluxo que pensamos que seria a forma mais adequada para a preservação de dados de pesquisa de revistas, no qual nós seguimos todo um fluxo para chegar de Dataverse a uma integração com uma rede logs ou com algum repositório de dados, seria também o de preservação de dados, como pode ser o Arquivemática. Isso para nós é muito importante, porque o serviço se integra com outros serviços, serviços dos periódicos, com os de repositórios de dados, com os repositórios confiáveis e todos os procedimentos de preservação, e com a guarda ou armazenamento seguro em uma caixa logs ou em uma rede logs. Essa para nós é uma das metas também, e nós já estamos trabalhando nisso, sabendo que o Arquivemática, por exemplo, ele se integra perfeitamente com o logs para poder guardar tudo o que passa pelo Arquivemática e todos os microserviços que o Arquivemática realiza. O Arquivemática, ele é muito usado na área de arquivos, mas também ele está sendo usado para coletar informações de repositórios e de arquivos também, né? Para chegar ao que nós pensamos que seria a rede logs. Bom, isso porque também na Cariniana e aqui no IBIC nós trabalhamos já com essa primeira etapa da preservação, que é a preservação da forma como devem ser processados os dados antes de entrar em uma caixa logs ou antes de entrar em um repositório, que seria o barramento para a preservação, e dessa forma garantir a cadeia de custódia, né, dos documentos. Então, isso vem porque muito tempo, desde que começamos, a preservação digital de periódicos foi nossa base. Sim, nós começamos trabalhando na América Latina, o Brasil foi o primeiro país que adotou a plataforma JS em 2003, aí continuamos trabalhando com ela, mas já se pensava, como foi mostrado também, que o PKP, o log seria a nossa ferramenta de
that
preservação
log is
digital,
our
e para implementar
preservation
ela,
tool.
pensamos no que seria a preservação digital
And we also
comunitária,
thought what
ou
would be
seja, é um dos
community
princípios
data
também do
preservation.
JASPER, né,
That's one of the
que nós
principles
pensamos
of
que não
JASPER,
basta
that
construir uma rede de
it's not enough
preservação
to have a
própria da
preservation
comunidade,
network
é necessário
of the
tornar ela
community. You have to make
autossustentável
it
tecnologicamente,
self-sustainable,
administrativamente e, sobretudo,
technologically,
financeiramente.
administratively,
É o que
and
temos
overall financially.
conseguido fazer nesses 10
And
anos,
this we
e
have been
sabemos
able
que
to
vem
do in
outras
these 10
evoluções
years.
também
And there
relacionada à
are
guarda de
other
periódicos de
things
forma
that we have to
comunitária
do
em várias
in
redes
order
também.
to have this preservation.
Mas o modelo do LOGS, que nós adotamos
The
desde o início
LOGS
para os
model
periódicos,
that we
continua
adopt
sendo nossa base, porque ele é um software e sistemas com outros serviços,
of
e
the
também
system,
toda a parte de
services,
migração para futuros
and
formatos.
migration to
Ela
future formats.
funciona
That's important.
aqui na Cariniana da mesma forma como em outras
And it works in
redes, só
Cariniana
que
as
aqui
other
estamos no
networks.
Brasil e nós
But
temos
as we are in
algumas
Brazil,
formas,
we have
digamos assim,
some,
mais locais para a gestão
we
dessas
have more
informações.
local
Nós temos todo um
ways of
fluxo no qual
management.
se
So
relaciona
we
com
have
as
a
parcerias, as
specific
instituições
flow
parceiras da rede cariniana, como elas
and
podem
relation
submeter
with our
seus
partners,
periódicos
how
para a
things can be
rede, e também
submitted,
aos usuários em geral, como
and
eles
also
podem
for
criar
users in general, how they
usar
can
esse serviço.
create
No caso das
and
instituições
use the
parceiras,
service.
algumas delas podem
In terms of
hospedar
our
uma
partners,
caixa
some can
logs e
host
criarem
a
nela também
logs
um
box
registro
and
das
have a
informações e da
registration of
coleta dos
the
periódicos, das
information
edições dos
of
periódicos, e
collecting
guardar
the
em uma das
journals,
caixas
and they can keep
locais.
them in one of their local
Essa
boxes.
preservação
And
funciona
this
basicamente,
preservation
como eu
works
mencionei, né?
basically, as I
Tem
said,
uma parte legal, que também, como no PKP se mostra,
legal
automatizada. Aqui, no seu
structure,
caso, é
framework,
mais formal,
and
nesse sentido de que nós
this
precisamos
is
de
a
um
little more
documento
informal,
assinado pelos
because we
gestores
need
dos
a
periódicos,
signed
autorizando
document
a guarda, a responsabilidade
authorizing
pela
the
guarda do periódico,
responsibility for
e
keeping
também
the journal.
responsável da
With
revista quanto do
updating
conteúdo da revista. Nós repassamos essas
and the person
informações para os
responsible for
editores
each
e
journal
também
has to
para
collect
os
all this
gestores das
information.
caixas logs, para que eles saibam como
We
administrar
send
as
this
caixas e qual seria
to
a
the
preservação que
log
deve ser
box
feita desses
managers.
periódicos, o
And
fluxo que ele
what
deve
has to be
seguir.
done, what is the
A
flow that has
última,
to be followed,
a última meta que conseguimos alcançar
and
foi a parte
the
da
last
aplicação
goal
de
was
plugin que vai permitir uma
a
submissão dos
plugin that will allow
periódicos à
submission of
Cariniana de forma
journals
automática para saber quando um
automatically
conteúdo foi atualizado
by
em uma das
Cariniana
revistas que
to
estão
know
guardadas na
if the
rede.
content was
Bom,
updated in
como eu
the
falei, a
network.
Rede Cariniana
As
é
I
uma
said,
rede colaborativa.
Cariniana
Ela
network,
tem
it's a
nesse
collaboration
momento 12
network.
caixas. São 12 caixas nas quais estão
Boxes
guardados os
in
periódicos.
which
São
we
mais
have
de
all the journals,
2.184
more than
periódicos e títulos de periódicos, com mais de
2,134,
26.000 volumes
more
preservados,
than
e
26,000
atendemos a
volumes preserved,
241
and
instituições
we
no
cater to
Brasil,
241
e algumas
organizations
delas,
in
as
Brazil, and some
399,
of
são
them
títulos da SciELO
are
Brasil, que vocês vão
399
ouvir aqui
titles, SciELO
em
titles.
breve, né? Essas instituições têm um acordo de
All
cooperação
these
ou um
organizations
termo
have
de adesão
cooperation
com a
agreement
Cariniana para poder
with
participar e poder ser
Cariniana to take part
as guardiãs desses conteúdos.
to
Então, por último,
keep
podemos
these
dizer que
contents,
para participar
be
dessa preservação
responsible
de
for its content,
periódicos,
and
as
to
instituições
take
podem
part,
participar como instituições
institutions
integrais,
can
parceiras
be
integrais,
as integral
parceiras
partners,
institucionais, colaboradores
institutional partners,
individuais e instituições
individual
usuárias.
collaborators,
Parceiras
and
integrais são aquelas que
user
vão
institutions.
compartilhar a
The integrals
infraestrutura
are
necessária
those
para a
who
preservação dos
share the
periódicos.
infrastructure
As
of
institucionais são
digital
aquelas que têm algum
storage and that
projeto
have
de preservação,
digital
pode ser de
documents,
periódicos ou de outro tipo de
could
acervos.
be
Os
journals or
colaboradores
other
individuais são os
types of
pesquisadores, as que
publication,
formam nosso grupo de pesquisa e que têm
individual
algum
ones
envolvimento com
participate
projetos ou
in
com estudos
research
de
or
preservação
projects,
digital. E as instituições usuárias, que são aquelas
and
que
the
nos pedem
institutions
para
are the
guardar
ones
seus
that
periódicos
ask
na
us
rede nacional.
to keep
Essa seria a apresentação
the journals in
da
our
Rede Cariniana aqui no
network,
evento.
and that's the
Eu agradeço a
presentation of
vocês e
Cariniana.
agradeço a
Thank
SciELO
you,
também pela colaboração.
and I thank you,
Estamos aqui
SciELO, for the
para qualquer
collaboration,
dúvida que tiverem.
and we are here
Obrigado.
to answer any questions you may have. Thank you. I'm going to share my presentation.
Rondineli, o seu áudio não está vindo, mas o seu microfone não está mudo,
So-
então não é uma questão do Zoom. Talvez alguma
Are not
coisa aí.
able to hear maybe something, although his mic is not muted, for some reason we are not hearing him, so he's trying to see if he can sort that out.
Não, a gente
While we
continua
wait.
sem te ouvir. Até
So
agora há
we
pouco a gente
still
estava te
can't
ouvindo.
hear you. We were hearing you just
Antes de
a
você
little while ago
compartilhar
before
a sua tela,
before you
uns
shared.
minutos antes, estava te ouvindo.
So I could hear you before, not now. You still can't hear?
O Rondineli saiu da sala e vai entrar de novo para ver se o problema é resolvido. Então, vou pedir para vocês aguardarem até o retorno dele, ok?
Rondinelli left the Zoom and is going to try to enter again to see if the problem is solved.
Alô? Me
Te
escutam agora?
ouvimos agora. Te ouvimos, Rondinelli.
Ufa.
Can you hear me now? Oh, wonderful. Okay, let me share my screen now. I'm sorry.
Rondinelli, antes de você começar, por favor, não esqueça de
Rondinelli,
chamar a
before you
gravação.
start, please record the event again. Resume recording.
Bom, eu me alongar muito com relação ao que você falou, né? Porque hoje, de uma gente faz parte de uma rede de uma cariniana, né? De começar a relação,
I'm sorry, it's chopping a lot. We cannot hear him well.
há praticamente 5 anos, 19 periódicos e 80 todos, obviamente,
I'm sorry, I can barely
uma coleção de livros
understand what he's saying.
books.ce.org, de dados de pesquisa .ce.org, coleção de pré-prints.ce.org. Sobre a situação digital, certo?
Rondinelli, desculpa te interromper. O seu som tá falhando. Não sei se é o fone de ouvido, que tá, Bluetooth, talvez, não sei, mas tá vindo bastante picotado a sua voz.
Melhorou?
Melhorou.
Tá.
Okay, now it's better. Is it good now, Alex? Yes, now it's okay. Okay, so speaking about digital preservation in a timeline, SciELO started preservation late. We started preservation in 2014. We signed an agreement with Clocks Network and started the preservation. We had to interrupt the process due to financial issues, and from 2015 to 2018, SciELO did not preserve its files. We resumed preservation partnership with the Cariniana network, which is the local partner for locks in 2021, initially collecting open access journals data, and in 2021 with the Cariniana network itself. There is a subnetwork within Cariniana that is used by SciELO. This subset or subnetwork allows us to collect only SciELO data that covers SciELO Brazil, as well as other SciELOs internationally in the future. Today, we only preserve data from SciELO Brazil, but in the future, we'll start working with the network of other SciELOs, 17 collections in the Caribbean, Latin America, Portugal, Spain, and South Africa. But that requires the support of the entire SciELO network. So far, only SciELO Brazil has managed to make available a number of nodes that is available for that. As I had mentioned before, there is a list of other collections that require attention in the digital preservation process. The plugin that SciELO uses to collect data at the LOCKSS nodes that we call LOCKSS boxes only allows to collect journals that are at the website scielo.br. For other collections, preprints, and Dataverse, we use a different preservation flow. We adopt integration with Dataverse using platform for the preservation process, the normatization of preservation, and we ensure that once a package for archiving is created, this package goes to 3 different places, ensuring a beginning of preservation, that is, not to store the data in the same place that it was processed. Currently, SciELO has 7,604 archiving units. These are the numbers of each volume of each journal. So 7,064 is the total number of journals. That is a growing number because SciELO processes around 500 articles per week, totaling 2,000 articles a month. So that's a growing number. So SciELO's purpose in coming years is to become a reliable repository ensuring the title that we are a reliable preservation unit. That's the criteria that some of the indexers require a certificate. Today, we are not sure, and Alicia mentioned about that, as well as Miguel, about the Keepers Registry that is at ISSN portal. Any magazine that's preserved at SciELO or Cariniana, LOCKSS, CLOCKSS, or PKP networks can be accessed directly at the portal. All you have to do is to type the ISSN of the journal, and you're able to see the preservers, what issues have been preserved. And so that's a way to check whether the journal is being preserved. You should access the Keepers Registry and check it. My presentation is short. There will be other seminars on topics related to open access journals. You feel free to access the website 25.cielo.org. And now we are open for the Q&A session. Are there any questions, Alex?
Tem no documento, a gente colocou lá algumas perguntas.
In the document, there are a few questions. Do you have access to the document? Yes, just a second, please.
Eu só perdi aqui o documento, deixa eu só consultar novamente aqui.
I have to access the document
Se você
again.
tiver fácil aí para me passar o
If
link,
you
eu
have it,
agradeço. Deixa eu
the
olhar.
link, please.
Deixa eu só abrir aqui.
Okay, I'll open it.
Já consegui aqui, obrigado.
I have it, thank you.
Conseguiu? A Carol colocou no chat de novo.
Sim, sim, consegui.
Carol
Obrigado.
posted it, the link on the chat box again.
Só um instante que com o Zoom ligado, meu
Just a
computador.
minute, please, because my computer is a bit slow when Zoom is on.
Rondineli.
Bom, deixa eu tenho uma pergunta aqui para o Miguel.
There's a question for Miguel
Eu não acho que a pronúncia não tá correta.
from Patrick
Mas ele pergunta o seguinte:
Washhouse.
obrigado a todos por
He's
sua
saying
informação
thank you
valiosa.
all for your valuable
Nossa
information.
revista
Our journal, Geriatrics, Gerontology and Aging, ISSN 2447 2123 has been circulating and its content is available online in our website since 2007. We've been part of the OHA since 2020. We do not charge APC. We adopt CC by license and started adopting the OHS a few weeks ago. I understood that through PKP, manuscripts published onwards will be preserved in PKP, and that we should consider adopting at least 3 or more archiving systems. On the DOJ and CLOC's website, we could not find a way to participate in the JASPER process. Could you show us the way? Another issue, how could we include our previous issues from 2007 onwards, metadata available either via PKP, CLOC's, or Cariniana? Actually, that's a question for Alicia and Urooj. Alicia, could you start the answer, please?
Sure thing. So I've put 2 email addresses in the chat, and there may be one for PKP as well. But to participate in JASPER, to get the Diamond Open Access journals archived, you just need to email preservation@doaj.org. And then 2 friendly people named Dom and Kyrie will help you get started there. And similarly, if you have other content that you would like to archive directly with CLOCs, if you drop us a line at info@clocs.org, we can get you set up there. That's totally cool. And Urooj, I'm sure there's an easy way to get in touch with PKP as well.
Yeah. So you can, I'll put our email address in the chat, but I wanted to clear up a misconception that I should have included in my presentation. And there's this assumption that because you're using OJS and because we have a preservation network, that you will automatically have your content preserved. And that is incorrect. You have to make sure to enable the preservation network on your instance of OJS, and you have to meet the criteria in order to do that, which means that your instance has to be version 3.1 or more recent. You have to have published an article, and you have to have an ISSN for that particular journal. So it's not automatic. Those things have to be done in order for your content to be preserved. And I'll also link the guide that we have that walks you through it. It's not an onerous process, but does have to happen in order for the preservation to take place.
Posso responder também?
Eu acredito que não tem mais perguntas, mas eu
I
tenho...
believe that there are no further questions, but I do have. Can I answer too? Sure, Miguel, go ahead. Well, on our side at Cariniana, we are also interested in participating in JASPER. From what I understood so far, maybe Alicia could confirm that, when a journal is already part of a network, supposedly it's preserved, but the idea is for it to join other networks as well. So we would have a journal preserved at Cariniana, PKP, and clocks. That would ensure preservation even more. So what's important is for journals to be first in one network and then in others. But that's a gradual process. It doesn't happen overnight. So first you have to be part of one network and then go to other networks so that you can create this JASPER community. That's what I understand, Alicia. Is that correct?
Well, Miguel, that is one way it can work, but what we find is, especially with small diamond open access journals that are scholar-led, that they have all of their time and energy is taken up by publishing the journal. And so we have to work together to make this really incredibly easy. We've had to simplify all of our processes at clocks and at DOAJ, and I suspect at PKP and Internet Archive too. So rather than expecting smaller journals to start with one archive and then to work with others, that may be a way forward. And that means that we archives have to work out how we're going to share content and mirror. So we have work to do together. DOAJ offers through JASPER another way in, which is one entrance and 3 archive partners. And eventually, once we figure out how to fund it, more archive partners. But it may be that we need still more ways in. So for example, hosting platforms have an incredibly important role to play. Anywhere that content from journals or books is hosted, those platforms can create pipelines to one or more archives as well. So we need to make sure that the infrastructure and the little tunnels and the bridges that connect us together are in place. And I don't think we've done quite enough in that area yet. That's why JASPER's a good start in the right direction. But you're right, it's not sufficient.
Não, ok. Eu queria também mencionar a segunda parte da pergunta de Patrick Rondineli, que fala sobre...
Second part of Patrick's question, how can we include previous issues in the networks? For example, I'd speak on behalf of Cariniana. When a journal has been collected by a Knox network, it collects what has been published online on internet. So if you have published previous issues, it has to be online with a new edition, and Cariniana receives this new data. So there are new issues that have been posted online. Now we have a plugin that will collect those issues automatically of what has been published. But it's important to know how to provide information of previous issues. I don't know how it works for you both, but that's how it works for us.
So, Urooj, if you don't mind, okay. So for clocks, we can take content in 2 ways. If it is online on the web, we can crawl it and harvest it this way. Or for older content that has been digitized or is in a store of some kind offline, then we can take an FTP transfer. Some large publishers send us hard drives through the post, actually, and they transfer content that way. We'll take it in just about any way that it can come. The important thing is to get the content preserved and the scholarly record protected. So we try to be as flexible as we can. And Urooj, you've sort of addressed the question, but maybe there are other ways too.
It was, so I know that once the plugin is enabled, and this is where the limits of my knowledge are going to come into play. But once the plugin is enabled, every time an issue is published, it will be archived. However, the question of whether past issues will be archived once the plugin is enabled is one I don't have the answer to right away, but I will make note and get back to you. I'm sure it is possible though.
Eu vou fazer uma pergunta.
I'm going to ask a question. Urooj put a scenario, showed that there are criteria. The criteria that PKP puts is that at least the journal is producing content. It has to have an ISSN, and there's also the issue of single DOI. Is this also a criteria? And the other question actually is there's a frailty of journals. That's what we're talking about the open access frailty. So if the journals are frail and they begin not to be have a regular production, they can stop to exist. And what is the behavior of PKP? What will it do in terms of stopping the preservation because they're not producing any content? And what would be the scenario to make this content available if imagining that this journal is frail, doesn't exist anymore? For example, in JASPER, PKP, or Cariniana, how could they make this content available, that this content doesn't exist anymore? That's what Lux showing, imagining that we are preserving, but these periodicals are not being preserved and they were lost for some reason. But the community wants this access, they need this access. How does Cariniana, Clocks, and PKP what do they do to make this content available back again?
I can maybe answer the question of the persistent identifiers. From my understanding, the ISSN, so the journal level identifier, is necessary, whereas the article level identifier is not necessary for the PM. In terms of the other questions, maybe I'll let other folks have a chance to address.
So Urooj, that's true for us too. The criteria for accepting a journal is that it has an identifier, an ISSN or an ISBN. And we also look for some reassurance that there's some kind of quality assurance procedure with the journal. So for example, being indexed in DOAJ or being on a platform where some content is indexed in DOAJ is very important to us. That's very helpful. We also, we don't provide an entirely free service, though we try very hard not to let money be a barrier and can lower costs where that facilitates preservation. But there are considerable costs in running the technical infrastructure and having software developers and engineers. So we do try to disseminate and share the costs around all of our supporting libraries and publishers in a way that's fair and equitable around the world. Turning to content that is triggered and brought out of the dark archive and made accessible, we host the content in 3 different places. So we have it on the Clocks website. but no one will ever find it there. It's not a publishing platform. It's not a platform like SciELO and very discoverable. So we also place the content right now with the University of Edinburgh in the UK and Stanford University in California. And their libraries have committed in the long term to continue also making copies of that content available. And we work with Crossref and other DOI registration agencies to redirect the DOIs or the identifiers from the original publication, which has now disappeared, to the archival copies that have been made available. So that's what we do now. Going forward, once we have more content that has been triggered and made available, we are definitely going to have to increase our efforts around the usability and discoverability of that triggered content. Right now, it's only 67 journals. It's not too much. But in, I think, the medium term, we need new partnerships with proper hosting platforms that can actually deliver up the content in due course and make sure that it's discoverable to the people of the future who will want to use it. So that's a future partnership potential. Miguel?
Sí, sí, estamos totalmente de acuerdo. En nuestra
We
rede,
are completely in agreement. We are young. We haven't had many cases. We know 4 journals that do not exist anymore, and we're creating a method to do a follow-up on these journals that are not published and to monitor what is being published. If we haven't received anything in the past 3 years, something happened. So we contact those who are responsible that are enrolled, and we ask for a position for be able to release access in one of the partner institutions. I think that's the only way of continuing access. Thank you for your answers. We have reached the end of this webinar. I would like to thank the presence of all of you. Alicia, it was a pleasure to have you with us. Thank you for your time. Urooj, it was a pleasure to meet you. Thank you also for your time and all the information. Very enriching. And Miguel, thank you as always, one of our partners at SciELO. Alicia is also a partner. PKP is always with us. Thank you to everyone who took part, and I hope that you participate in the coming events of SciELO. Please access our celebration site with other seminars. Thank you. Goodbye to all.